Most people think land is stolen with force, with guns, with machines. But sometimes it starts with a single piece of paper, printed neatly, worded politely, confident enough to erase generations without ever touching the soil. The morning it began felt normal. That's the part that still unsettles me. The sun came up slow and gold over the pasture, just like it always had. The cattle moved calmly through the grass. The wind brushed the fence line with that familiar sound that tells you the day will be warm but manageable. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, looking out at land my family had worked for generations. Everything was where it belonged. That illusion ended at the mailbox. The envelope was thin, official-looking. No logo I recognized, just my name printed clean across the front, like someone had taken extra care to make it feel legitimate. Inside was a single page. No greeting, no explanation, no apology, just a declaration. According to the letter, my 50 acres of ranch land had been reclassified as community access property due to historical shared usage. My fences were now unauthorized barriers. The land, effective immediately, was to be opened for recreational access pending my cooperation with the transition. Transition, like my ranch was switching cable providers. I read it twice, then a third time, slower. The words didn't change. That's when the fear settled in. Not loud, not explosive. Quiet, controlled. Because nothing had been taken with force. No fire, no theft, no confrontation. Just paperwork. Paper doesn't argue. Paper doesn't knock on your door. Paper just sits there, confident, waiting for you to underestimate it. I stood on the porch longer than I should have, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at land my father and grandfather had worked with their own hands, fence lines we'd repaired together, fields that held decades of memory. And on paper, none of it was mine anymore. That was when I knew this wasn't a mistake. Mistakes come with apologies. Mistakes get corrected. This felt deliberate, calculated, like someone had already decided I wouldn't push back. I folded the letter carefully and made a promise to myself right there. I would not raise my voice. I would not panic. And I would not let my home become a bargaining chip. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew whoever sent that letter was already moving. Late that same morning, I heard tires crunch on gravel. Not hesitant, not lost, confident. A white sedan rolled down my driveway, clean paint, HOA logo on the doors, a small light bar on top that didn't do anything, but didn't need to. It existed for intimidation, for that half-second of doubt where people question whether they're allowed to stand on their own land. She stepped out like she'd rehearsed it. Perfectly pressed blazer, oversized sunglasses, clipboard hugged tight against her chest like a badge of office. She didn't ask if this was my property. She walked the driveway like she already owned it. "Mr. Monroe," she said, glancing at the clipboard, "I'm Karen Dawson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." Two board members followed a few steps behind her, overdressed and uncomfortable in the dirt. "We sent you a letter this morning regarding the community land designation." There was that word again, designation, the word people use when theft needs to sound respectable. She launched into a practiced speech about walking trails, picnic areas, scenic overlooks, how my land would increase property values for the entire community. And in that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about community. This was about money. She wasn't asking permission because she couldn't afford to go back and admit she'd promised something she didn't own. "We'd like to discuss next steps." "Next steps for what?" I asked. She smiled, tight and patronizing. "For integrating your property into the community plan." Not if, when.
I crossed my arms. Get off my land. Her smile cracked for just a second. You'll be hearing from our legal counsel, she snapped. Good, I said, calmly. I'll be paying close attention to everything you put in writing. She left angry, but not worried, and that's what worried me, because confidence like that doesn't come from authority. It comes from momentum, and momentum means the invasion was already planned. I thought the letter was the attack. I was wrong, because that afternoon, the first car pulled into my driveway, and that's when I realized she'd already told the neighborhood my land was theirs.
The first car pulled into my driveway about an hour after Karen left. At first, I almost ignored it. Out here, people miss turns. GPS lies once the pavement ends. It happens. But this car didn't slow to turn around. It rolled forward with intention, tires crunching on gravel like it had every right to be there. A family stepped out. Mom, Dad, 2 kids. A golden retriever that bounded ahead like it already knew the place. The dad waved at me, smiling. "Beautiful day," he called. I walked toward them. "Afternoon," I said. "Can I help you?" He looked genuinely confused. "We heard the ranch was open now," he said. "HOA said it's community space." Community space. Those words hit harder than Karen's speech ever did. "This is private property," I said evenly. "You need to turn around." They exchanged looks, not hostile, not argumentative, just uncomfortable, caught between 2 versions of reality. The mom pulled her sunglasses down slightly. "But the announcement—" "I don't care what the announcement said," I replied. "This is my land." They apologized, they left, and for a moment I thought maybe that was it. 15 minutes later, another car pulled in, then another. A couple in hiking boots, water bottles clipped to their bags, phones already out, snapping photos like they were standing on a scenic overlook instead of a working ranch. "HOA cleared it," one of them said before I even finished speaking. By mid-afternoon, I stopped going back to the house. I stayed near the driveway, arms crossed, watching cars slow when they saw me standing there. Some turned away. Others rolled the dice and pulled in anyway. Each time, I said the same thing. This is private property. No, you do not have permission. Yes, you need to leave. Each time, I got the same response. "But Karen said—" That phrase started to feel heavier every time I heard it. A bright blue minivan pulled in and parked crooked near the fence line. The sliding door flew open and kids spilled out, laughing, running toward the field before their mother even had both feet on the ground. "Stop right there," I called. She turned, irritated. "Excuse me?" "This isn't a park," I said. "Get your kids back in the car." She stared at me like I'd insulted her personally. "Karen said this was a safe zone." Safe zone. Another soft phrase, another way to make resistance sound unreasonable. "Karen doesn't own this land," I said quietly. "I do." She pulled her phone out immediately. "I'm calling her." "Call her," I said. "Tell her the owner is home." That stopped her. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she huffed, whistled sharply, and started herding the kids back into the van. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "You can't just change the rules." "I didn't," I said. "She did." By late afternoon, my jaw hurt from clenching it. That was when the truth settled in. This wasn't about neighbors enjoying a view. This was about precedent. If enough people walked my land without consequence, Karen could point and say it had always been that way. If enough photos existed, she'd claim historical community use. Paper only works if you defend it. I pulled my phone out and started documenting everything. License plates, faces, times, every car that crossed the line, every person who stepped onto my land without permission. This wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was polite, persistent, and calculated. And if I didn't stop it soon, it wouldn't matter what my deed said. That night, I stopped trying to reason with anyone.
because the next morning the cars didn't arrive curious or confused. They arrived scheduled.
By the next morning, it wasn't random anymore. The first car arrived just after sunrise. Not slow, not unsure. It pulled in like it was on a schedule. Two women stepped out wearing matching athletic tops, yoga mats tucked under their arms. They didn't look around for permission. They looked for flat ground. "Morning," one of them said, smiling like we were neighbors sharing a sidewalk. "We're setting up over there." "No," I said, "you're not." She blinked, then laughed lightly, like I'd told a joke. "It's fine," she said. "Karen said this area is open for wellness activities." Wellness activities. They started unrolling their mats anyway. That's when it hit me. This wasn't people wandering in anymore. This was people being sent. I walked closer, slow and steady. "This is private property," I said. "You need to leave." One of them sighed, annoyed. "Why are you being like this? The HOA approved it." I pointed back toward the driveway. "You came through a gate. That's how you know it's not a park." They packed up, whispering to each other like I was the problem. 10 minutes later, a pickup truck rolled in with 3 teenagers riding in the bed and a drone case between them. They jumped out laughing, already arguing about camera angles. "We're filming scenic shots," the tallest one said, proudly. "Karen posted about it." "Get off my land," I said. "Relax," he replied. "We're not hurting anything." "You're trespassing." They hesitated, then backed off, muttering complaints. As they sped away, the drone slipped out of the truck bed and hit the dirt. I picked it up and set it by the fence. I wasn't collecting trophies. By noon, it felt like my ranch had turned into a timetable. Dog walkers, a couple with trekking poles, a man with a metal detector who looked offended when I told him to leave. "I'm just looking for old stuff," he said. "On land that isn't yours," I replied. Every single person had the same justification. Karen said. That was when I understood the strategy. She wasn't trying to win an argument. She was trying to manufacture history. If enough people used the land, she could claim precedent. If enough time passed, she could say resistance came too late. That's when I stopped standing at the driveway. I got in my truck and drove into town. The county records office smelled like old paper and tired air conditioning. I slid my parcel number across the counter and said, "I need everything. Deeds, zoning, anything filed recently." The clerk came back with a thick folder. My grandfather's deed, my father's, mine, clean, unbroken, no HOA authority. Then I saw it. A newer document, different font, different paper. Annexation request, community integration filing, submitted by Karen Dawson. No owner signature, no approval stamp, just her name and a list of historical community uses. She hadn't found a loophole, she'd invented one. I photographed every page and drove straight to Curtis. Curtis didn't skim. He flipped straight to the signature page and nodded once. "Hubris," he said. "That's always how they lose." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You stop trying to explain, and you draw a line so clear no one can pretend they missed it." "Court?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "First move is deterrence." He looked out toward the trees. "Electric, livestock grade, county approved, non-lethal, covered in warning signs." I exhaled slowly. "And if someone ignores it?" Curtis shrugged. "Then they ignored physics." If you're following this far, now's a good time to subscribe, because from this point on, the story stops being polite and starts being irreversible. The next morning, I went to work. Steel posts, insulators, heavy wire. Each strike of the sledgehammer rang out across the field, steady, deliberate, not angry, measured. The sound of something being set in place. I ran the wire tight, straight lines, no shortcuts, mounted warning signs every 20 feet, bright yellow, black letters. Danger, high voltage, private property, no trespassing. No one could say they didn't see them. By midday, the fence stood quiet, unfinished but with full of potential. I checked county code one last time. Legal, compliant,
clean. That's when Karen arrived. Her sedan rolled up slow, inspecting the fence like an unapproved renovation. She stepped out, sunglasses on, clipboard tight, smile ready. "Well," she said, "that's dramatic." She reached up and tore one warning sign right off the post. "This kind of scare tactic won't hold up." "Put it back," I said. "You don't have authority to," she replied, smiling. She waved to someone behind her. "Everyone relax," she said loudly. "He's bluffing." Then she looked at me and said the words that sealed everything. "Go ahead," she smirked. "Turn it on." Rehook. End of part 3. I flipped the switch, and for the first time since this began, Karen realized this wasn't theater. It was a line.
The fence didn't roar to life. It didn't spark. It didn't crackle like something out of a movie. It just hummed, low, steady, alive. The sound slid along the wire like breath through metal, stretching across the edge of my land in a way that was impossible to ignore once you noticed it. Not threatening, not dramatic, just patient. Karen's smile faltered, just slightly. "That's unnecessary," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. I didn't reply. She took a step back, then waved it off like she'd already rewritten the moment in her head. "This won't stop us," she said louder. "The picnic is still happening." She turned and walked back to her car, confidence restored, already planning the version of events she'd tell later. The fence kept humming. The picnic happened 2 days later. It was a perfect day for it, which somehow made everything worse. Clear sky, soft breeze, the kind of weather people use to justify bad decisions. Folding tables appeared, coolers thumped onto the grass, music drifted across the field, cheerful, loud, aggressively happy, and underneath all of it, that hum. Karen stood near the fence with a megaphone, smiling like she was hosting a ribbon cutting. Pink cardigan, clipboard tucked under her arm. "Everyone relax," she called out. "The fence is just a deterrent, totally safe if you're mindful." People laughed, nervous at first, then confident, the kind of laughter that happens when a crowd decides the rules don't really apply today. I stood a few yards back with a coffee mug in my hands, watching like I was observing weather. I didn't shout, I didn't wave my arms. I had already warned them. Kids ran past chasing a soccer ball. A frisbee sailed wide and bounced near the wire before rolling back. Someone tried to keep a kite from diving into the brush. Then the jogger came through. Headphones in, confident stride, cutting corners like this was a park he'd run 100 times before. He wasn't looking at the fence, he wasn't listening to the hum. His shoulder brushed the wire. Zap. Not loud, not cinematic, sharp. The kind of sound a body makes when it argues with physics and loses. He yelped and jumped back, stumbling into a folding chair and nearly falling over a cooler. For half a second, the entire field froze. Then, chaos. What was that? Oh my God, is he okay? The music cut out in a screech. Someone dropped a bowl of food. A dog barked. Karen raised the megaphone halfway to her mouth and stopped. The jogger stared at his arm in disbelief. "You electrocuted me," he shouted. I sighed. "I put up signs. I warned you. You listened to her, not the laws of physics." Karen spun toward me. "This is dangerous," she snapped. "You can't do this." "It's a county-approved, non-lethal livestock fence on private property, with posted warnings." Behind her, the soccer ball rolled again. Too close. A kid ran after it. "Stop!" someone yelled.
Too late. The ball hit the wire and shot backward like it had been slapped by an invisible hand. The kid screamed and bolted back to his parents. Panic spread fast. Someone tried to retrieve a kite tangled near the fence using a metal camping fork. Zap! The fork flew from his hand and clattered against a cooler. The picnic collapsed in minutes. Chairs tipped. A grill nearly went over. People grabbed kids, dogs, anything they could carry. Sirens cut through the noise, first distant, then close.
Police arrived, then an ambulance. An officer approached me, measured and calm. "Sir, we've had reports of an electrical hazard." "Yes, officer," I said, "on my property." Karen rushed forward. "He set a trap," she shouted. "People could have been killed." The officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, slow down." I pointed, not at Karen, but at the signs. Bright yellow, black lettering, every 20 feet. "Danger, high voltage," the officer read. Karen went pale. "I removed one sign," she stammered. "Just one." The officer's expression hardened. "You removed a safety warning?" Silence. The jogger was checked, shaken, embarrassed. Fine. Within minutes, the field emptied. Cars sped away. Coolers were abandoned. One lone sandal lay forgotten near the fence. Karen stood alone by her sedan, clipboard limp at her side. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said quietly, "it isn't." As the last siren faded, the ranch settled back into silence. The fence kept humming, not triumphant, not angry, just patient. Because the thing about ignoring physics is this: eventually, physics collects. By Monday morning, Karen rewrote the story. According to her, I was the danger. And that was the moment Curtis decided it was time to close the trap. Karen didn't retreat. She reframed. By Monday morning, the HOA email blast hit every inbox in the neighborhood. According to her version of events, what happened over the weekend wasn't predictable or preventable. It was an ambush, a reckless act by a hostile landowner, an unprovoked endangerment incident. She promised lawsuits. She promised consequences. She promised the community would be protected. What she didn't mention were the police reports, or the warning signs, or the cameras that saw everything. She assumed panic would unify them. Curtis knew panic just needed direction. He called me mid-morning. No greeting, no build-up. "She's lying," he said. "I figured," I replied. "She always does at this stage," he said calmly. "So we changed the audience." That's when the real counterattack began. 3 days later, the neighborhood woke up to thick envelopes in their mailboxes. Heavy paper, no HOA logo, just a law firm letterhead and a red stamp across the front. Notice of litigation. People opened them standing in driveways, at kitchen counters, over morning coffee. Then came the silence. Inside was the same document for everyone, plain language, no drama, just numbers. It explained that by asserting jurisdiction over private land, the HOA had assumed legal and financial liability for that land, maintenance, insurance, risk exposure, administrative penalties. Then came the figure, $500,000. But the line that shattered everything was printed in bold, joint and several liability, which meant this: if the HOA lost, every homeowner could be personally responsible. Not Karen, them. Phones started ringing before noon. People did the math fast. 50 households, hundreds of thousands, enough to wipe out savings, enough to trigger foreclosures, enough to turn loyalty into fury. By evening, Karen's porch light was on, and people were knocking, not politely. She tried to reassure them, told them the lawsuit was exaggerated, that the HOA incident was being handled, that HOA insurance would cover everything. Curtis had already anticipated that. The next envelope arrived the following morning. Same letterhead, same stamp. This time it included attachments, police reports, photos, timestamps, coordinates, and one line that changed everything. Warning signage observed missing prior to incident, followed by a witness statement. Karen Dawson admitting she removed the sign. That's when the email stopped, and the shouting began. People weren't angry at me anymore. They were angry at her. I watched it unfold on my cameras, not on my land, but hers. Neighbors clustered on her lawn, papers waved, voices raised. "You said it was safe. You never mentioned liability. You lied to us." Karen tried to control the moment the way she always had. It didn't work. Power only exists as long as people believe in it, and belief evaporates when it costs $10,000.
That night, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Not an announcement, a summons. The parking lot was full when I arrived. People stood outside, clutching envelopes like evidence bags. Inside, the room buzzed with raw, angry energy. Karen sat at the front table. No clipboard this time, no smile, just tension. She tried to speak. Someone shouted her down. A man stood and read the liability clause out loud, slow, word by word. By the time he finished, the room had turned. "This is on you," someone yelled. "You dragged us into this." Karen's voice cracked. "I acted in the community's interest." That sentence didn't land anymore, because everyone now understood the truth. She hadn't built a park. She'd sold a fantasy she didn't own. If you're still watching right now, this is the moment to subscribe, because what happened next didn't just end the fight, it erased the HOA entirely. By the time the meeting adjourned, the HOA wasn't a governing body anymore. It was a mob with paperwork. Karen slipped out through a side door alone. My phone buzzed as I drove home. One message from Curtis: "Trap closed." Karen still thought this was about land. She had no idea the real damage was just beginning, because next she was about to learn what happens when you accidentally hand your enemy the majority vote. The second emergency meeting wasn't called by Karen, and when I walked in, I brought something she never expected: the bylaws.
The second emergency meeting wasn't called by Karen. That alone told me everything. When an HOA president calls a meeting, it's about control. When the members call it, it's about survival. The parking lot was already overflowing when I arrived. Cars idled along the curb. People stood in small clusters, clutching folders, envelopes, printouts, proof that this was no longer a neighborhood discussion. This was a reckoning. Inside, the room buzzed with low, angry murmurs, the sound people make when they've done the math and don't like the answer. Karen sat at the front table again, but something was different. No clipboard, no confidence, just her hands locked together, knuckles pale, like she was holding on to the last piece of driftwood after a shipwreck. She banged the gavel. "This meeting will come to order," she said sharply. "Only HOA members are permitted to speak or vote." There it was, the last wall. I didn't argue, I didn't interrupt. I walked forward. Each step felt louder than it should have. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. Someone whispered my name. Karen saw me and stiffened. "Mr. Monroe, you are not a member of this association." I stopped a few feet from the table. Then I reached into my jacket and dropped the book. Thud. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. The HOA bylaws, thick, worn, dog-eared, landed squarely in front of her. "I suggest," I said calmly, "you open it." She didn't move. One of the board members did. He flipped pages, confused, until I spoke again. "Article 4, Section 2. He froze, then read aloud. "Voting rights shall be proportional to annexed acreage under association jurisdiction." The room went dead silent. Karen's face drained of color. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "You annexed my land, 50 acres. I gestured around the room. "The rest of you, quarter-acre lots, maybe half if you're lucky." People swallowed hard. Someone exhaled sharply. Karen shook her head, frantic. "That's not what that means." "Yes," I said, "it is." I turned to the room. "By claiming my land as HOA property, you didn't just assume liability." I tapped the book once. "You transferred power." The realization hit in waves. Murmurs rippled outward. Eyes moved from the bylaws to Karen and back again. She stood up so fast her chair screeched backward. "This is a hostile takeover," she shouted. "This is manipulation." "No," I replied. "This is arithmetic." I straightened. 50 acres gives me a majority vote." The room held its breath. "I move," I said clearly and calmly, "to dissolve the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." Someone gasped. Someone laughed, not mockingly, but relieved, a sound like a pressure valve finally releasing.
Karen slammed the gavel.
"You can't!"
"I vote yes," I said. Silence. Pure, stunned silence. Then a board member spoke quietly. "All in favor?" Hands went up. Not a few,
most. Because suddenly this wasn't about pride or politics or parks. It was about escape, about savings, about ending a nightmare. Karen stared at the sea of raised hands like she was seeing them for the first time. Her voice broke. "You can't do this to me." I met her eyes. "You did this to yourself." The gavel came down again. "This motion passes," the board member said. "The HOA is dissolved." No shouting, no victory speeches, just relief. People stood, hugged, shook hands, some wiped their eyes. Karen sat back down, smaller now, ordinary, just another person who had believed her own authority for too long. I picked up the bylaws, closed the cover, and walked out. Behind me, the Willow Creek HOA ceased to exist. The morning after, the neighborhood felt different, quieter. Not the awkward silence of an unresolved fight, but the calm that follows a storm once it finally burns itself out. I was on the porch with my coffee when the moving truck arrived at Karen's house. White, unmarked, early. No crowd, no speeches. Boxes moved steadily from door to truck. Lamps, chairs, the artifacts of authority reduced to cardboard and tape. Karen stepped out once, no blazer, no clipboard. She didn't look at my place, not once. She got into her car and drove away without a word. By noon, the HOA signs at the neighborhood entrance were gone. No announcement, no ceremony. They simply vanished. The fence still hummed, but now it sounded different. Not threatening, protective. Curtis came by that afternoon. He leaned against the fence post, listened to the hum for a second, and nodded. "Good line," he said. We didn't talk about Karen. Didn't need to. That weekend, I fired up the smoker. Nothing fancy. Neighbors came, not because a board told them to, but because they were welcome. Kids read the warning signs out loud. Dogs stayed on leashes. People asked before stepping anywhere. That was the difference. Respect doesn't need enforcement once it's understood. As the sun dropped behind the ridge, I sat back on the porch and listened to the fence hum softly in the dark. My land, my responsibility, my peace. What struck me most wasn't how close I'd come to losing it, but how easily it could have happened, not with force, not with fire, with paper, with confidence, with a lie told long enough to sound official. That's how things get taken these days. Quietly, unless someone says no. The fence kept humming, not angry, not proud, just steady.